Apologies. Dr. Rajkumar, please do come. I wanted to personally invite you. Please come.
I think my task is very easy. Lunch is 5 minutes away. Well, 5 minutes. Distinguished chief guest, members of the trust, ladies and gentlemen. My job is very simple. I am by profession a retired bureaucrat, a writer at the moment. I was asked by Mr. Saifullah to give a talk. So I asked her, what is it all about? So she said, it's, one of those exchanges of ideas. So not to bother the audience, I'll make it very brief. I have worked as secretary looking after the northeast of India, and I come from that part of the country. What General Hasnain has said and other distinguished speakers are all about disaster management. The only issue that I want to highlight here for you all to consider is that unlike other states in India, for instance, when we plan for national disaster, we have basically two institutions, at the national level and at the state level. Now, the state level makes his own plan of action, and I have shared many of them, read through, gone through. Unfortunately, the Northeast, unlike the rest of the country, is, sad to say, ethnically divided. The problem, therefore, of collectively looking after the resources, the manpower, of how to manage the region. So you have a situation where you have independent states which are politically desirable, but economically unviable. Now, when it becomes economically unviable, all developmental activities and all activities, for instance, mitigating developmental problems, taking care of people, becomes a big problem. Unfortunately, the structure of disaster management at the moment is state-wise. So you have 8 states in the region, which is in terms equivalent to, for example, Rajasthan, UP, Madhya Pradesh. Whereas when you plan for the state of UP or when you plan for the state of Rajasthan, if you translate it, it actually covers planning for the entire Northeast. Unfortunately, the Northeast is fragmented in its approach to such disaster management. My request, therefore, to General Hasnain is, please bring up this issue. Fortunately, unfortunately, my batchmate is the Secretary to the Prime Minister, and I would not like to ask him. So through, as they say as a bureaucrat, we go through the proper channels. General Hasnain is here. Incidentally, his brother happened to be my batchmate also, Raza. My request is through him that when it comes to the Northeast, please treat the region as one. Let the state plans be there. But when it comes to an approach of managing the Northeast in terms of disaster management, please have a regional framework. Have one, because today we don't have. So you have a disjointed approach to national disaster management, which gets translated into other areas. I, of course, had the privilege of chairing, when I was in the Ministry of Defense, I was asked by the Prime Minister's office to head a committee of experts to look after the supply of ration, food, etc., to our defense forces in Ladakh and in the Western Command area, Northern and Western Command. The problem there was that food, especially vegetables, used to be lifted from Chandigarh, brought to Ladakh, and supplied. So the government wanted, why not encourage the communities there in Ladakh to grow vegetable, which is an indirect form of sustaining the community, and simultaneously giving our forces the required green vegetable which they require. I had the chance to travel to Ladakh 4 seasons, winter, summer, at all the 4 seasons. Spend time there with my colleagues there in the committee. For example, I do not know how many of you know. I was surprised, and I come from the Northeast. But when I landed in Ladakh, I learned for the first time how locals there preserve vegetables. Because in winter you get nothing. So I asked, भैया कैसे करते हो इधर? कैसे रखते हो चीज़ें? He didn't say anything. He took me to his house and he started digging a pit. He dug about 2 feet and he took out what turned out to be a patta gobi, a cabbage. He dug it out of the earth, showed it to me, peeled the first top few leaves and said, "Saab, aap khaiye, ye ekdam taja hai." And I realized that the local communities there in the Northeast, in Ladakh, for example, have very similar techniques for sustaining community. Why I bring this subject, ladies and gentlemen, is that perhaps while we have disaster, we are going to have disaster, however hard we try, communities and human beings, we have to survive. How do we survive? What are the means? When I was secretary there, I retired 2009, so it's a long time, but we had 2 very, very wonderful projects to sustain the local community in the hill areas. One is called NARCOM, it is the Northeastern Community Resource Mobilization, which was done in collaboration with IFR, International Food for Agriculture Development, the success of which we were able to mobilize resource from the World Bank, about 700 crores, for which we started another project which is called NERLAP. These are purely local-oriented projects to sustain in times of natural calamities, etc., etc. As I said, Mrs. Saifullah told me we are going to have lunch, and after lunch we'll exchange some ideas. But I have requested her to permit me, because I stay in Gurgaon and I left home at 9:15 to be here, to be at 11. So I am grateful. I hope she'll oblige me to allow me to leave after lunch. But I am very, very grateful just giving this thought and sharing it for a few moments. I'm sure we'll have more opportunities to exchange ideas, etc. But let me confess, I have really learned something for the first time. I am no environmentalist. I am just a simple retired civil servant. But Mrs. Saifullah, thank you so much for inviting me. And let me share as I part, Mr. Zafar Saifullah was my boss in Karnataka, and I had the privilege to succeed him years later as the Additional Chief Secretary and Development Commissioner of Karnataka, where he once was. Thank you, and thank you for patiently listening. Thank you very much.